Welcome to the Village Talks. This is a space where physiology meets lived experience, where we talk honestly about the body, the nervous system, relationships, and the real questions families are asking without fear-based narratives or a one-size-fits-all answer. We're your hosts. I'm Dr. Jaimy.
And I'm Dr. Brittany. We're chiropractors, perinatal specialists, and humans who work closely with families through preconception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and early parenthood. Whether you're preparing for pregnancy, currently pregnant, newly postpartum, raising a little one, or supporting someone who is, you're in the right place.
Let's get into today's conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Village Talks podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about water breaking, what actually happens and what to do after that. There's going to be a bunch of different signs. There are different ways that your water can break. And so we're going to kind of dive into all the things to look for, what they mean. And majority of the time, it's not what you see in the movies. I'm excited for this one. Let's take it away.
Yeah, I think first to set aside some common myths, which is, based on movies and TV shows and how pregnancy and labor is often represented in media. It's probably not going to go like that.
Yeah.
It's not usually a gush and water all over the floor and everybody race to the hospital and then seeing babies born,
Yeah.
It's not the most common way for labor to begin.
Totally.
So if that's what you're waiting for,
No.
we want to shift your expectation.
Absolutely. And if your water does break, you don't have to panic.
Yes.
Because again, how it's depicted in the movies is very rushed and, oh, we gotta go now. Baby's gonna fall out. We're not gonna make it.
Yeah.
But usually that's not how it happens.
Yes. And I think babies can arrive quickly after water breaks.
Yes, absolutely.
But not when your water breaking is the first sign of labor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like one of those things might happen, but
Yeah.
probably not the other one.
Yep.
In the way that it's often depicted.
Yeah.
So, I think statistically it's, what did we say, 8 to 15%?
Something like that. Yeah. It's
an
pretty
average
low.
of like 10% of labors actually begin that way, which is pretty low.
Yep.
It is usually something that happens well into the progression of labor. I think with my first, I was maybe an hour before pushing. And with my son, it was maybe 5 minutes before he was born.
Nice.
So like it definitely was not how mine started, but for some people it does.
Absolutely.
And then oftentimes then there's nothing for potentially hours before anything.
Yeah. 12 to 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we really start feeling contractions and labor starting to progress. And all that kind
so
of
it's
stuff.
definitely not an urgent thing. So it's like, it's a thing that usually happens in labor.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be, I'm walking around, I'm perfectly fine, I'm going about my day, I'm grocery shopping, oh my gosh, my water broke, and now I'm delivering my baby in the aisle at the grocery store. That's highly unlikely.
I know. Yeah. And what I really just want from this episode too, right, is for us to not panic when things like that do happen, to understand what's actually happening in our body at the time, what we're going through, things to look out for and what to prep for, right? So we are going to talk about color and smell and what those things mean and stuff like that, and how much is a trickle versus a full gush and what that means and all that kind of stuff, right? Just so we have a better understanding of what to do and what it means. And so we don't have to panic. And can we stay calm, because we know, all right, great. If it's a little trickle, here are some things I can do. If it's a big gush, but I don't have signs of labor, here are some things I can do. If my water hasn't broken, but I'm feeling contractions, it's okay. We're still in labor, right? So it looks very different for everybody. I'm excited to just get into it, the nitty gritty of it all.
Yeah. Well, what's normal? Because I do think for most people, this gets mentioned in a visit with a care provider, or maybe there's a handout about it. But there's not often a lot of details, a lot of information. And so I think this might be one of those episodes where people are like, I had no idea.
Yeah. It's going to be fun.
Yay, here's a fun way to get some extra information while you go about your day.
Absolutely. Yep. So let's talk about, I would say probably like a puncture or a little trickle versus like a full break of your bag of waters? Or actually, let's just start. What is your bag of water? How about that?
Yeah,
We'll talk about that.
So, I mean, amniotic sac, right? It
inside the uterus.
Yeah. So between the interior wall of the uterus and your baby, right? It's what contains the fluid that they're floating around in.
Their urine.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And that it is something that is constantly being created and replenished, right? And so when we look at measuring fluids, we have to think, there are different amounts that are considered normal at different points in the pregnancy. It is one of the things that they're looking at and measuring as part of a healthy pregnancy. But it's what creates that zero gravity environment for baby and allows for movement, and it muffles sound, and it, when we look at measuring baby and assessing the health of all these parts of anatomy scan, all of this is done through that water, right? So like anything through water, there can be distortion and things like that. So I think it often is the source of error when we look at, some of those things. Like, it's like, yes, it's science, and these are, diagnostic tools that we use, but also it's through water. Yeah. So, that's the water, that's the fluid. Yes, it's highly composed of water, but there's a lot of other things happening in there as well. We call it water because it's fluid and because it is often clear. Yeah. And so it gets called water, but there's the amniotic fluid. Yeah, the amniotic sac. So it is it's a membrane, right? And then there's some fluid in there. And then your baby's floating around in there.
No, it's real fun.
Yeah. So it is, when the membrane ruptures, right, or the bag of waters breaks before 37 weeks, depending on that rupture, that may necessitate early birth, right? I had a patient many, many years ago who was 22 weeks maybe, and was traveling up. They were missionaries in Mexico, and they were driving up to visit with family before returning to Mexico for the birth of the baby, and fluid started leaking. They crossed the border into, I can't remember if they were in Arizona or New Mexico. I want to say Arizona. Went into the hospital, and they were basically like, there's nothing we can do. So we'll keep you overnight, and we'll monitor you, and basically this will be treated as a miscarriage. And they prayed, they slept, they rested, and her amniotic fluid replenished itself, and she carried that baby to 38 weeks.
Amazing.
On bed rest. So I'm like, that's an unusual case for sure. Yeah. But we are continuously making more amniotic fluid through this process. So it's not always a diminishing resource. Yeah. Is what I think most people also don't realize. So low fluid, sometimes there are things that can be done, and sometimes there's nothing, and that necessitates early birth. Yep. But once we get into labor itself, and that begins, then there's everything from it being the first thing that happens to it not happening at all. Yeah. And your baby being born within an intact membrane. Like, that's also possible. So everything in between is normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's called NCAL when they're born in the sac and the sac hasn't ruptured or the waters haven't broken yet, depending on terminology and stuff like that. But actually, I think, I'll link it in the show notes, but I think there's a Cochrane review actually about what to do if your bag of water has like trickled, leaked, that kind of stuff before 37 weeks. It actually shows the best thing to do is nothing. Yeah. And we'll get into signs of infection and how to prevent it for the most part and things like that. But basically kind of, if all is well, if baby's doing well, if mom is doing well, just kind of let them go to term. Yeah. And majority of the time there's a really high percentage where women just went into labor naturally. Yeah. And everything was fine. Yep. Yeah. Which is actually really cool. Yeah. Yeah. And so sometimes when we think my bag of water is broken, there's nothing we can do for you. Yeah. We're going to treat it as something that's not great.
Yeah, because there isn't a specific intervention. There's no treatment for it. It's just we're going to wait and see. And either this issue will resolve itself, whether that's a closure or healing process. I don't know that we really have any information.
I don't think we do either. Yeah,
because it would be a midterm internal pregnancy study, right? Like I don't know that we're ever going to really have that information without some pretty impressive advances in imaging.
Yeah.
Or labor starts or signs of fetal distress or signs of infection. So it's kind of like that is just kind of like we're just gonna sit and wait and see what happens.
This is one of the things where I'm like, I'm okay with the wait and see approach. Yeah, like I'm not always in love with that approach, but this is one of those cases where I'm like, like well, we can wait and see and monitor and make sure that everything's going well. And I can't remember if it's the same study or there's another study where when we're at term and our waters break, but like signs of labor haven't started yet, women who are allowed to wait up to 72 hours, a high percentage of them, I think it was like 75 to 80% of them went into labor naturally.
Over the course of time. And that's, I do think, this waters breaking is one of the things that begins the clock on your labor, right? So if your labor starts with rupture of membranes, that's going to have an impact on your labor, that starting with contractions or some other things, we're not looking at that same timeline. So it is something to pay attention to. I think even the clarity on that is something that isn't there for a lot of people, right? Because I think there is this expectation of it is going to be this really dramatic gush of fluid. And when it's not, then it's like, is it my water? Did I just pee a little bit? I'm like, well, have you already been peeing a little bit? Like, is this like your new norm? Because if so, then that's a reasonable suspicion. But if not, we can't just assume that any fluid is urine. And so, like it's the color, it's
the smell,
the odor. I have one woman, gosh, I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was. And she was scheduled to see us I want to say she was about 35 weeks. And she came in and was really like agitated and upset. But she came into the clinic for her appointment. We could see that and was like, is everything okay? And she's like, I just went to the bathroom and it was pink. And we're like, okay, yay. So have a seat. Do you have a quick phone number to call your midwife? And she's like, well, I called him and I left a number with the helpline, but I'm not really sure what to do. And I'm like, let's get some taking you in to assess you for your SI joint pain is really not what we want to do in this moment because so she sat, we made her some tea. We called the helpline from the front desk and it took a couple times to get somebody to answer because it's a larger midwifery practice. And they were like, well, we need to have you come in. I was like, So she went in and it was amniotic fluid and it was early and they were like, they ended up inducing labor. There were signs of fetal, just like she was fine, baby was fine, but it was like, this was not a wait and see. There were signs that this baby needed to arrive today. And then she came and saw us postpartum and it was great. But it was awesome. Like, I think she was like, I'm not at home. I'm not near the hospital. I was like, nope, but good news. We know how to handle this. You're just going to sit here. And then you can sit here calmly until we get instructions from your midwife.
And that's what's great about people who specialize, actually truly specialize in pregnancy, just don't do a weekend to adjust safely, to understand what happens in a situation like that and what you can do and how you can support and all that kind of stuff. Like it goes so much deeper into truly understanding how to support during this time. And that's a perfect example of it.
Yeah, because is this an emergency? No. But do we just proceed through the course of our day like nothing has happened? Also, no.
And we also don't just send them away either. Like, sorry, we don't know what to do for you. Like, we're going to sit you down. We're going to make you tea. We're going to talk you through it. We're going to help you get on a helpline. Like, there are other ways that you can support too instead of being just like, well, sorry,
sending
like
her
can't
to
adjust
sit in
you today.
her car and panic, waiting for a call from the midwife isn't probably the best situation either. So it could be clear. It could be pink.
It could be slightly yellow.
I would say, is it yellow?
Yep.
Because if it's yellow, it's probably pee.
Sometimes it can have a yellow tint to it, but I do think majority of the time it's like a combination of a little bit of urine plus the amniotic fluid, what gives it that. But sometimes it can have that.
So like the end of the day, you gotta smell it.
Yeah, smell it, and then also too, a lot of times, so like if it's a high leak, for example, and that's usually the puncture that trickles a little bit, that fills up in the cavity while you're sitting, so you don't always feel the gush while you're sitting. But if you do a big shift, or if you get up to stand and then you feel like a little bit of a leakage and you're like, did I just pee myself? Or was that, I don't know.
Or even laying in one position for a long period of time, and then you go to roll over, change. It's that positional change, like fluid shifts, right? You'll get a wave of fluid. It will release once you start to change positions. Absolutely. Or there's a gravitational shift. So it's like, oh, you're now every time you change positions, there's a little bit of leak. Like
that's a sign. That's a signal.
And that sometimes is where it's tough, because, you know, if you are already wearing a panty liner or something where you can see the color of fluid, but if you're not, then we don't know if it's clear. We don't know if it's cloudy. We don't know if it's pink. We don't know. Is it just on the bed? Like, are you smelling the bed? Are you smelling your clothes? Like, so there is a little bit of, but I do think this is it is a good time to call your provider, right? And they're probably going to ask you these questions, but it's also like, you don't have to panic, right? Like it might be something, it might not be. But the key is remain calm. Unless it is obviously blood, remain calm. And call your provider. And just see what they have to say.
And they have a bunch of different ways that they do test for the fluid to see if it's amniotic fluid. Usually it's a swab just to kind of check and see what's going on there. They do have the at-home kits too, that you can do. It does not negate having your provider check, but it can be like, if you test it and be like, oh yeah, like, hey, amniotic fluid is leaking. What do I do next? What would you like me to do next? And they're going to go through the host of questions. That can be good too. The thing that I always caution for the at-home kits though is because it does potential risk for infection.
So are they internal? The home ones are internal swabs as well.
So it's one of those things where it is nice to know, like midwives are going to have this. If you're going to have a home birth and stuff like that, they usually have those kits to test for it. But it's one of those things where it doesn't replace your care provider knowing that it's happening, or them testing either, because they have to look too and see, like they do test it, I think, for some bacterial things, potentially for infection. But we want to prevent as many things going internally to prevent infection if there is any type of breaking of waters, whether it's a slow leak or if it's a full rupture.
When do you think would be a good time to utilize an at-home kit? Like, can you think of a situation like here? I'm thinking we have, you know, we live in a dense urban area, but we are, the majority of the state of Colorado is not an urban area. So we often have people who are traveling down from the mountains, or from they might be traveling an hour plus to get to their place of birth. So I'm like, I could see maybe for some of those people, definitely, that it might not be a bad idea to potentially save themselves the trip. The 2-hour round trip, if there are no other signs of labor. Absolutely. Any other situations where you can think?
I mean, here in Denver specifically, because of the barometric pressure, I think it's nice if you're not 5 to 20 minutes away from where you're going to go get checked out by your provider, like, it's a real thing when there is a change in pressure here in Denver. Big storm, pressure drops.
There's a specific name for the weather phenomenon, and I can't remember what it is either. But we experience some of the most dramatic barometric pressure changes on planet Earth.
So I would say just being like your location could be part of it, because we've had a couple clients, I've had a couple doula clients as well, where water breaks before labor starts. And it is usually, we had a big storm, there's a big pressure change. And so now I've gotten to a point here, I mean, in California, I didn't have to do that really, but now here, if it's wintertime and we have a storm rolling, and I'm like, okay, here's what to do if this happens. If your water breaks before labor starts, this is what it means. This is what's happening. This is what to look out for, things like that. And I do feel like it helps a lot, but I never had to educate about it prior to living here.
Yeah, that was my question, because it used to be, I feel like even in the Midwest, it was like, like with storms, like babies will come with storms. I'm like, you guys get thunderstorms and stuff in California, but it's not
a big change in pressure. I don't feel like it's pretty.
Now I have to try to think back. On whether there were more babies with storms in the Midwest. If you're not in Denver, drop in the comments
let
whether
us
or not
know.
you also, because I've been here for 20 years. Like, I don't remember. And
Yeah.
it is very much a thing here. But I'm curious if that is something that people experience as much.
Same.
I'm
curious. Any birth worker providers not in Denver, if you want to let us know if this also happens where you live.
I mean, everybody knows the full moon's a thing, but here storms and pressure changes are also, it's like, oh yeah, there'll be extra babies because of that internal external pressure change environment and it triggering that membrane rupture for sure.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay.
I love it. Ooh, I'm so excited to see.
Anything else on kind of that slow trickle?
No, that's about it. It doesn't, I mean, it can kind of like we talked about with the slow trickle, depending on the practice and what they're comfortable with and that kind of stuff. Sometimes in more traditional thinking of birth in the medical system, you have a 24-hour time clock, whether it's a trickle, whether it's a full rupture. This is where you ask, like, well, can we continue to monitor things like that? And the monitoring can be at the hospital, right? You're most likely not going to send you home, but they're going to keep monitoring you at the hospital. And sometimes, you know, it takes up to 3-ish days or whatever. Sometimes they will send you home, but put you on bed rest. So I think that's just something to talk with your care team about, of what is the policy and what they're comfortable with is an important conversation to have. Yeah. Because
it gets handled very differently by different providers and different practices. And I think always the biggest concern once membranes rupture is the potential for infection. And so that's where the time clock comes in. That's where let's minimize introducing any internal exam, gloved or not, has the potential to introduce bacteria or infection. And so, you know, they are typically mindful of keeping that to a minimum. But also, if you are at home, we're not doing swabs over and over again to see. We're not.
Once we get a positive test, like we know amniotic
then
fluid
you know,
is leaking.
But it is just that mindfulness of, you know, minimal things to introduce infection is the key. And
then, I mean, breaking the water too can be done manually by a provider, and a trained, skilled provider. Like residents have a really hard time doing it when they're first learning it because it is a skill. So sometimes bags of water are ruptured as a form of natural induction. I do air quotes there. So that's another, like they use it's almost like a crochet hook that they go in and use it to break the bag of water. And sometimes that can be a leak. Sometimes that can be a big gush. So that's something also to kind of just look into and consider and understand. Understand that procedure, the benefits, why it's being recommended, understand the risks involved with it, and then deciding whether or not that is something you want to proceed with or, you know, it is considered an intervention. Like it's considered a very natural one, but it is still that we are doing something actively to try to facilitate this process. And it's still, that time clock still applies to you in that type of setting, whether it was broken naturally or whether they do it manually. So that's another thing to just keep in mind in your birth process. Like if you felt pressured in your birth at all to kind of get things moving, especially after they broke your bag of water, that's why. Because the risk of infection goes up and then the clock goes up. So it's one of those just to be mindful of, I think, is an important note. Just understanding all the nuances that go into it and having those conversations with providers, because as we well know, that in the midst of labor, there isn't always the time taken to really have a lengthy conversation and do a full explanation of all of the potential outcomes. I think, you know, patients often feel like these things are treated very casually in the midst of labor and spoken about as if, this is just the norm. This is what we do. This is part of the process. This is a normal part of the process. And they don't really talk about it as an intervention. They don't really go over the risks. And, you know, it's like, yes, we understand that for you,
the birth providers here, this is something that you're doing really regularly, and this feels like a very standard part of the process. But for this individual mom or patient, this is all new to them.
Yep.
And if there isn't that conversation about desires and goals at every step of the way, this is where sometimes something comes in and it now is going to impact the rest of the labor in a way that if you don't understand all the risks and benefits, you don't have the whole picture
exactly
of what it means.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important piece. Like, yes, it is it a huge thing? Probably not, right? It's not a major procedure by any means, but it is something that potentially impacts the rest of your labor. So you just want to kind of understand. And I think, as if this is not your first episode, you already know that we are big on information, education, informed consent.
Absolutely.
And so thinking about these things, doing a little bit of research now during your pregnancy is helpful, because then it helps you form opinions on what does and doesn't align with your goals and your values.
Absolutely.
And you're not trying to figure this stuff out in the course of in the midst of your labor.
Yeah. When you're just in another realm and a different portal and trying to
sign
stay consent forms.
And trying to stay in your zone, right? In your flow.
Yep.
And then these things pop up and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. Now I'm pulled out again. Hold on. Wait. The other thing too, like the purpose of the amniotic sac in labor, I think is really important for people to understand too, and why intuitively, just from witnessing birth, why I think it breaks usually once labor has started and all that kind of stuff too, is because it acts as a cushion between the strength of your contractions, fetal distress, all that kind of stuff. It takes a little bit of that, the intensity and the pressure off.
Yes.
And so when that intensity, baby gets further down into the pelvic cavity, into getting engaged, going through mid pelvis, all the pelvic outlet, that kind of stuff. And then usually that's when the water breaks, is when we're already in active labor.
Yep.
There's a reason for that intuitively, of just what it feels like for me. You can tell me how it felt for you in your experiences in birth, because I feel like that's another thing I hear consistently of like, oh yeah, once they broke my bag of water, like things started happening really fast. It got really intense. And like, it actually started not necessarily painful, but it can be more uncomfortable than maybe what it would have been if we hadn't broke our bag of water, that kind of stuff. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, when I talk about birth and I talk about the sensations we experience in birth, pain is not usually the word that I use, only because it's such a broad word.
Totally.
And it really doesn't adequately describe and encompass all the sensations of birth. I usually just talk about intensity. Yeah. When you say like increasing intensity, like, that's a very good way to describe it. I don't think that is often really talked about in birth prep and in childbirth ed classes, and even in the course of like, oh, we'll break your water. It is absolutely acting as a cushion. So it is impacting your experience of sensations in your pelvis. And I think it is also impacting baby's experience of those contractions, because we often see two things happen, whether water breaks on its own or it's facilitated manually. But everything gets more intense after that. Everything. And we often will see baby's heart rate drop. We'll start to see some decels. We'll start to see that baby isn't tolerating contractions as well. And it's like, their cushion's gone too. And that doesn't mean it's more painful for them or that it's inherently dangerous. It's just a part of this process, right? If you can experience an intensity or an increase in intensity, the baby's experiencing that as well. And I think it was absolutely noticeable with my first, because just where it was in my labor. And I thought the sensation in my body was like, oh, this baby's coming out now. It was all of a sudden 1,000-fold increase in the amount of pressure during that contraction. And then and it was kind of a big gush. And then it was like, oh, that's what that was. And then it was like relief. And the next contraction I was like, oh, holy hell. Like, I thought that one was rough. Because there isn't this global pressure behind the water. Now it's bone into pelvis, right? Than it was, although hers was a pelvis and not a head, but again,
there's an episode coming for that. Don't worry.
So that was a different experience, partially because of that. But then with my second, I actually didn't feel my water break. I was in a birthing tub when it happened. So I didn't feel it. My husband was doing hip squeeze and he felt it because he has large hands. So his hands were on my belly in the front and he actually felt like a pop. He was like, it was like a balloon popped, except it was your belly. It's like, it was really weird. Yeah. But actually like felt that pop internally.
Nice.
And so
cool.
Yeah. And then, thankfully, no dark fluid or blood coming into the birthing pool. So the midwife is like, okay, well then it's clear. So, and I like I said, that was maybe 5 minutes before he was born. So I don't really remember a change in intensity at that point. Things were pretty intense at that point anyway.
And in the water, it feels a little bit different too.
It was a very different experience. Had I been out of the water, I'm pretty sure it would have been equally as intense as the first time around. But that gets reported by patients really frequently as well, is that like everything is more intense and then inherently often also gets described as more painful. So I think that where you are in your labor, where your baby is in your pelvis, whether or not you have pain relief on board, whether you're trying to avoid any type of pain relief, like those are all things to consider if we're looking at doing this manually, right? If this is happening on its own, then it is what it is. It's out of your control. And you use your tools to move through and manage contractions in whatever way you had been up to that point and whatever plans you had for that. But for sure, it's things often feel quite different in your body after membranes have ruptured.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, I've been a part of home births where they're birthing in the tub and even though it's clear fluid and you're in clear fluid, you're in water, you can see it sometimes too. We're like, there it is. Yep, there's your water broke. Good. Yeah. Okay, great. Like everything's moving through, and it's usually like right before baby comes out. Because it's a rush
of fluid, right? Like it is, and especially like birthing pools are usually very calm. So when there's no water movement, it's not a hot tub. There's no jets, right? So when it's very still water, it's pretty obvious when there's new fluid being introduced into the environment. So, and then I mean, and that's kind of something to think about too, when you're in a birthing tub, usually there's not a monitor on mom and baby. So, that's just a little bit of a different experience when you're in a bed and things are monitored. And I think, this is sometimes where chances are the same, if not similar processes are happening, regardless of whether you're in or out of the water. Monitoring absolutely has a place, but it often provides opportunity for us to panic or to feel like we need to do something, we need to intervene. When it's like, baby isn't bouncing back as quickly as they were before. It's like there's a reason for that. And this is this like yellow flag and we're watching, or is this a reason for panic when we're really near the end and this can be a normal part of this process? Because yes, if it's more intense for you, it's also more intense for this baby. And intensity doesn't inherently mean danger, or that something can go wrong it's possible. It's always possible that things can take a turn for the worse or decline very quickly. But having that sort of that understanding and trust in this process, that's a difference just in models of care. And so it's got to be a factor when you look at the models of care in which you choose to give birth and whether or not they align with your goals for birth.
Absolutely. Let's go back to color a little bit, right? We talked about yellow, what those things can mean. Pink, red, obviously there's some blood fluid in there from somewhere coming through. Sometimes that might be known as the bloody show, but majority of the time, sometimes I feel like it's more of our mucus plug if it's pinkish. Bloody show is is bloody show.
It's bloody.
Yeah. It's usually happens closer to active labor, not early latent labor. Just from what I've seen. It's not foolproof. It's not 100%, of course, but usually that's typically what I see. But then let's talk about it if it's a little bit green or a little bit brownish and it's slightly foul smelling and that kind of stuff. So we'll get into infection after this, but usually if it's that green or brown, that's meconium, also known as mech, where that is some of the first bowel movements that baby has as they're kind of working through their bowels and figuring everything out. And sometimes they can have their first bowel movement in utero during labor with all the pressure and things like that. So let's kind of get into that. So
I mean, definitely more common the longer labor goes. Right. So that is one of the concerns with, you know, going post dates, is that possibility. This can be a positional thing as well. It is a lot more common with breech birth to see meconium. So I think it's why we are paying attention to it, and that is an absolute call to provider immediately. I mean, all of these really should be, but there's no mystery there, right? There really shouldn't. And sometimes a light brown and a dark yellow get a little mixed. And like, you know, but there is definitely a difference between the odor of urine, right? Human urine has a pretty distinct odor, even if it's kind of faint. It's that ammonia smell. Whereas bowel movement and of course infection, like it is foul smelling. It's not a good smell. There's no mystery of like, ugh. That's not right. That's probably not good. I need to absolutely alert somebody. Because it can also be indicative of fetal distress. And so, you know, again, our bodies are smart. If your baby's in distress, there's a good chance your body's be like, okay, we need to get this baby out.
Exactly.
Let's get this show on the road. So those for sure are, it's not what we want to see. And
why? Let's talk about what happens if baby breathes that in potentially with the meconium. What can happen in that? Like why that one is more of an immediate call to your provider if that happens, even if labor hasn't started, or like even if we don't have contractions and signs of labor. Well,
and we have, I mean, think about, right, we talked about amniotic fluid being baby's urine. Like baby is swallowing, right? Baby is practicing swallowing. They are swallowing amniotic fluid.
They're like little fishes.
And so there's swallowing that. And then there's when we get to the point where baby is emerging and then they are taking that first breath and there's potentially exposure to infection.
And it can get into their lungs and things like that and potentially cause some respiratory distress or issues later. So we just want to, that's one of the ones where it's like, if you do think that or see that, it's immediate call to the provider.
Because there are some additional considerations. There are more things to look out for. Like there is an increased likelihood of some complications and some follow-up aftercare for baby in that particular case.
And then signs of infection, we'll just kind of go through it. Sometimes it's not always a foul smelling discharge or something like that. Common signs that we always look out for infection: fever,
low grade fever,
lethargy. How are we doing? That kind of stuff.
Feel like crap overall.
Exactly.
That, like, I just don't feel good. And I do think, especially in late pregnancy, we don't always feel 100%. So sometimes it's easy to be dismissive of like, well, of course I feel like crap. I'm 41 weeks pregnant, you know, without potentially seeing any fluid leaks. Or, you know, winter, people are like, oh, I think I'm getting sick. And I'm like, well, what else is going on? What other signs are you having in your body? Have we had any sneaky peas lately that we need to, you know, like, so it is just sort of like, as a standalone, it could be a cold, but with other things, or like, you've been thinking maybe your water broke or you had like a little gush and then there hasn't been anything and you're like, oh, maybe I peed, and it was like, but was there odor? Did this fever and did this general malaise start after that? Like, this is where like conversations are helpful. So, you know, again, goal today of like, keep these in the back of your head.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, you know, I always want to hope that most people call their providers, but we also have people like, well, I don't want to be a bother. Well, I don't want to seem like an alarmist or a hypochondriac. You know, there are people who kind of live at both ends of that spectrum. And so it's like, all right, well, if you can have a gauge for like, okay, but here's really when you need to call. Like,
The more empowered we have with this education, right? The calmer we're going to feel, and we're going to have the different tools in our toolbox to be like, okay, cool. Like,
and
I'm not
confidence.
Yeah. Like, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not emotional. Yes, those things can be true.
Yep.
At the same time, though, it's usually not that. You know when something has changed and shifted in your body, whether you know what it is or not.
Yep.
You know something is going on.
Yeah. Just remembering how to trust your instincts. I think for a lot of us, we are taught and told to ignore them from a relatively early age of like, brush it off, like, you're fine, like, brush it off and
rub some dirt on it.
Yeah. And as a parent, part of that is like trying to keep everybody calm, right? Like, not everything is a panic. But it also, for some of us gets internalized as being dismissive, and that we do overreact, and that we shouldn't make a big deal out of everything. And for those people, this is the kind of situation, I think, where there can be some ignoring it or dismissing it, and we don't always want to do that. Totally. So I'm like, if you have more information, then it gives you more confidence to say, I'm not just panicking because I don't know, but like, okay, I took a second, and based on the information I have, I do think that I need to call somebody, or I need to have this checked.
Yeah,
and
definitely. At
the end of the day, like, if your instinct says that there's something going on, until you have answers, then you kind of have to keep digging in this day and age. Absolutely. With the current state of our healthcare system. And not because providers don't care, but they're on a time crunch. And so if they're saying, like we've said before, if they're saying, I'm not worried about it, great. Tell me why you're not worried about it, or tell me why I shouldn't be worried about it. Like, give me just a little bit more. Maybe it's only 2 or 3 sentences, right? Like, I'm not worried about it because it was only once, and it was a week ago, and you said the fluid was clear, and your blood pressure is great, baby looks great,
fetal
no signs of infection, fetal movements are like, great.
Yep. All the good things to look out for.
Yes. Like, just run me down the list of why you're not in a panic, so I don't have to panic either.
Exactly.
And sometimes it does mean going in and getting swabbed, and they're like, it's not fluid, and you're like, oh, like, don't feel dumb, don't feel bad, don't feel like you're wasting anybody's time. That's what everybody's there for. Is, that's the primary role of your birth provider, is keep you and your baby safe. Yep. That is the main thing that they are there to do. Every test they run, every visit, everything they're checking is to make sure that you and baby are still safe. And so if you walk away from a visit with nothing more than like, oh, everything's fine, great.
Amazing.
Those are the best visits. They feel like an entire waste of time. Especially at the end, people are like, oh, another visit, and they weigh me and they check my blood pressure and everything's fine. And I was like, great. That's best case.
Yep. Uneventful is great.
Yep. I promise it's not a waste of your time. Because things can change very quickly. So I think that's the thing too, is like, if we have what maybe is a little leak or little gush, and we're just not sure, but then in the back of your head, it's like, what am I looking for over the next few days?
Exactly.
Fever and lethargy and general malaise are on the list.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. Great conversation. Yeah. That's
it can be nothing at all. You may never have to think about a single one of these.
Yep.
But just in case you do.
Yep. Here you go.
Yeah. A little bit of information.
Yay. Awesome, you guys. Well, thank you for joining us on yet another episode of the Village Talks podcast. If you have any questions, as always, drop them in the comments. If you want to share your own stories with your water breaking, what you went through in your birth experience, anything like that, we would love to hear it, because these conversations help reach other parents who have either gone through something similar or have questions about it. So we always recommend and encourage you to be active in our comment section, because we actually read it and we love reading them. So as always, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. If you found today's episode helpful, you can subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave a review. It helps this podcast reach the families who need it most. You can find us at Belly Bliss in Denver and online for resources, workshops, and support. Until next time, take care of your body and trust its wisdom.